Hello and welcome to Film Lovers. I'm Sonia Chung. I'll be talking to people who work in the film industry and who are also avid film lovers. Today I'll be talking to cameraman and he does a bit of directing. His name's Nigel Rogers. Hello Nigel, how are you?
Hi Sonia, I'm very well, thank you. Thanks for the introduction.
Did you like it?
Well, yeah, no, I think I needed a musical fanfare, but that's fine.
We can do a bit of that if you want, like the drums rolling or something.
Yeah, yeah.
So we talked a bit before this. Just to let everyone know, how did we sort of come across each other? It was basically through shooting people, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's one of the many sort of like networking sites.
For people who work in the film industry.
Yeah, of course.
It's a very good site, isn't it?
Yeah, don't get me started on that. It could be better designed as a site, but yes,
Okay.
as an idea, as a way of encouraging filmmakers to meet together and meeting experienced people, meeting less experienced people, it's a good vehicle for that.
Sure. All right. So why don't we take it away and you start by telling us a bit about yourself. So basically a bit about your background, how you started, and yeah, just basically the history of your career from then beginning to up to now, really.
Well, you're asking an old man how he got to being old, and I've done an awful lot
what I
of
mean,
things.
you know what I mean. I just want to know how your career evolved. So, how did you get?
Yeah, no, that's fine. No, I don't mind telling you. It's just how long have you got? No, I'll try and keep it brief.
Okay.
Effectively, so I was very passionate about photography as a young man, and in those days it was film, and I developed my own film, and that was my passion at school, and I took over the school darkroom that at the time was unused, and by the end I was teaching everyone else how to take photographs as well. That led me on to my university degree, which is at Middlesex, and they said, look, we can't really teach you much about photography. I focused on illustration instead. One of those random things. There's decisions I made at the time that were perfectly reasonable, but with hindsight were not the right decision. Anyway.
Yeah, but we all do that, at the time we think it's a good thing to do, and then after think I really shouldn't have done that.
Well, it's the challenge, isn't it?
Yes.
Making the right decisions at the right time. And back in my day, definitely no one helped you much, really. Yeah, you were pretty much, which is not a bad thing. The idea was more, or the prevailing idea was, you just give people to find their own space, to find their own path, which is fine. So I did. So anyway, from photography, I then went into illustration, and then came out of college and actually got a job in advertising as an art director, which suited my personality at the time, because it's like the being knowledgeable and skilled in a whole variety of things rather than just one, and it was a creative thing. So it was about imagination and ideas, and very early on I discovered that there's no shortage of ideas or generating new ideas, so that wasn't a problem. Spent about 5 years in advertising, by which time I'd acquired a wife and 3 children, so at a young age. So at that point I tried to go into teaching, but that didn't really work out, because I graduated from that, getting a teacher's degree or whatever. And then I was applying for jobs in advertising at the same time, so I went back into advertising, and the pay was instantly 3 times as much as well. So it was just one of those things. So pushed me back into advertising, and then through advertising a bit more. I was already using cameras, whether I was commissioning video, and I'd either hire a camera or I would get other people to do it for me. So I've had a long relationship with such things, both photographic and video cameras. And that's sort of led through all of that. Advertising director, creative director, and then it's like, okay, no, start out on my own. As a cameraman, back to my first passion. And then I've done short films. I do lots of commercial work still. And then it's just pushing on that door of actually, well, look, the technology is sort of suddenly so much more accessible for independent production, as opposed to Hollywood, which is still the machine it's always been. So now you have tools for production that sort of come full circle, because back in the day when I developed my own film, I could do that and I had control and I was able to get one ahead of the next person. And today, now with the technology and the computer and the cameras, you can do very high. It's very hard really to distinguish you and the big guys using them even more expensive cameras. There are differences, but the difference is much less now.
Yeah.
And now and that's sort of like 5 years ago, and now today it's now pushing a bit more. So we've got convergence. Convergence first was between still cameras and video cameras, but now we've got a sort of convergence between video cameras and cinema cameras and setups. And it's interesting, that transitions and automation coming in, autofocus, but on a new level, and things like this. So the tools have changed, whether you've adopted them or not. If you were always at the top, you really haven't had to, because they haven't changed that much at the top.
Okay.
But the budgets are millions of pounds, so it's just a different machine, a different thing to be a part of than where I'm now, which is independent film. And I'd rather create my own content, and often, a film that Hollywood can't make very easily. It could, but it won't, for various reasons. And that ties in with creativity. So there's not the limitations equally that go with a big production, not least all the legal requirements and all of those things. When you're independent, there's a bit more space to be creative.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That's very good introduction. Well done. Well done, Nigel.
And I'm 95, and I've got about another 20 years to go of my career.
You're not 95. That's very impressive, though. Well done. So basically, at the moment now, you do a lot of cameraman work, and you also do a bit of filmmaking on the side, don't you?
Yes. Well, it's an overlap, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of filmmakers starting out tend to be cameramen, don't they? As their bread and butter money, I guess.
In as much as, yes, they can buy a tool, yes, to do it. And yes, independent video production is massive. And obviously with the internet as well, it's got even bigger. The challenge perhaps is earning a good living from it, as opposed to just a modest living.
Sure. And it's so competitive now as well. And like you said, because technology is always changing, and now we also have phones, for instance. I mean, you can go out and make a film with an iPhone now, can't you, really? So
yeah.
So it has advantages and disadvantages like any other thing. But it's also a good thing. Do you have to constantly go up for training when there's a new program out, like editing wise or camera wise? I'm assuming you'd have to keep going up for courses, maybe.
Well, yeah, obviously part of the role is to be on top of the changes, and now the changes are occurring in so many different things. So before, perhaps you only need to know one piece of software. Now that potentially there's 20, and you've got to decide which of those you keep most up to speed with.
Right.
So I still have quite a broad base. I knowledge areas outside of what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, but I can still draw upon. And that's more about understanding what can be done. So that informs your creativity, but hopefully doesn't inhibit it, which is slightly different. So it depends what hat you've got on that day.
Yes.
Whether it's production or creative, direction, then you have to sort of change your mindset a bit. But yes, so yes, I'm constantly learning. That's probably a better way of putting it.
Yes.
That is part of the joy of life.
Yes, exactly. I love the way you sum things up, Nigel. So, for instance, I wanted to talk about your career in advertising. That's quite an interesting way, and actually, a lot of like famous filmmakers now start off in advertising, don't they? I remember talking to someone in a past episode, and them saying that filmmakers like David Fincher started out in music videos, but Ridley Scott started out in advertising. I think it was more the not so much the David Fincher generation, was probably more music videos, but that seems to be the way they started off as well, is what I'm trying to say.
It was the heyday of advertising. Today is a different beast.
Okay. Can you explain a bit more? Because that is quite an interesting...
Well, so one, you could earn, you were paid a lot. Yeah. And the value of your creativity in many respects was higher, because there was a lot of mystery around how you did what you did.
Yeah, I can see that actually. Yeah.
Whereas today, it's all on YouTube. All the secrets are there, which is a double-edged sword. It's not a bad thing in many ways, but you'll find often the best people aren't giving much away still, because you still need a bit of mystery as to how you do what you do. Yeah.
It's a very interesting job, though, actually, when you think about it, because you're trying to think of a way to advertise a product and how to make it appeal to people. So you've got to make it stand out, don't you, in that much respect?
Yes, but you see, you've got the marketing department who's actually coming up with the strategy and what they're wanting you to say, and then you're just coming up with a creative way of saying it. Yes, so part of the job is trying to get to the core of possibly what's good about that product over the next one.
Okay, so you obviously enjoyed
or creating it.
Yeah, for sure. You obviously enjoyed it because you spent a long time working.
Yes, yeah, of course. But it's commercial creativity, so it's not. I'd put it a small C rather than a big C. Art is more the big C, but that much freedom that the big C gives you, it just hasn't suited my personality. I didn't like the isolation of it in a way, even though some art is collaborative.
Yeah,
and filmmaking is 100% collaborative.
Oh, of course, yes, definitely. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's right. So that's very like art direction in that respect.
Yeah. Who were your film influences? So who were your favourite filmmakers while you were growing up? Who did you look up to? Did you have any in particular, or?
I consciously didn't.
Or now? Okay. Or now?
Whereas now there's so many, aren't there? But there are certain individuals who are exceptional, and I have to accept at this stage in my career, I'm not one of those. Even if I can pull some out of the bag, I might be able to shock people, but I won't have a lengthy career producing things like Spielberg or whatever. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'm not actually waiting for that call. And what was nice about YouTube is I've met some other peers who have said likewise. You know, they're not actually looking for that now. They're just looking to enjoy what they do. And they also, it's quite revelatory to know you can actually earn a living and not be one of the top directors.
And I guess be a bit more anonymous as well, which is in a way...
Well, that's good. If that's the classic, would you choose wealth or anonymity? Wealth and fame, or wealth and anonymity? Unquestionably, I'd rather have the wealth without the fame.
Well, it's kind of like a catch-22, really, isn't it? There's like...
Yes, but that's the funny side of filmmaking, is it does attract vast amounts of wealth, money. So that in itself is a different beast.
Okay. So you didn't have anyone you looked up to really in the filmmaking industry while you were growing up, but did you have any films that you really liked to watch, a certain type of genre? What kind of films would you watch when you were...
Okay, so part of the challenge with that is I've watched thousands, literally thousands of films. Far too many films. Far too much.
Like all of us,
content.
But say when you were a little boy, what kind of film would you go and watch with your would you go to the cinema, and would it be like a big event? Would you watch like a Western, for instance? Do you know what I mean?
Again, I've been around too long. When I remember going to Bambi and crying.
Did you really?
But I was only like 4.
Bambi was really shocking to a lot
It
of
was
people.
traumatic.
It was. I mean, I saw that as a kid, and didn't they ban it for a period because like little kids were crying and absolutely traumatized?
No, in my day, that was fine. We were allowed to cry. Traumatizing children was a challenge back in the day rather than a crime.
Because I remember seeing somewhere a thing about it, and Disney didn't pull a stunt like that many years later until they did The Lion King when they killed off his dad. What I can't remember what the king was called. What was his like Mufasa?
Yeah,
his brother. So yeah, I mean it's quite a traumatic thing to see in a family film.
Yes,
But they could get away with
as
that.
I say,
Couldn't they?
life was a bit. I don't know the word really.
Less
a little
sheltered.
less. Yeah, that is. Yeah, of course. That's what I meant by we were exposed to everything, and there was less censorship of things in a way. But then, that was the time.
Yeah, yeah.
I did enjoy Star Wars first time round as well, so I was waiting for each episode to come out.
Okay. So you saw
yeah,
all of them.
yeah, of course.
Would you call yourself a Star Wars nerd?
No,
No.
I like science fiction.
Okay.
And the films, yeah, it was more that was epic, wasn't it? I mean, Jaws traumatized me, so I found it very hard. I went
It still
on
scares
holiday.
me. I've seen it many times.
Yeah. Well, that's it. It deals with something primal, doesn't it? It's funny, but yeah. Anyway, so films have obviously influenced my life. But then I've sought out so I like extreme films more because it's about seeing something you haven't seen before or trying to understand something, and there's a natural sort of like attraction to some of the darker things simply because they're not okay, or they're not things I want to do, but they still sort of fascinate me in a way. So I do watch horror. I've watched a lot of horror, but that's not my niche. That's not all I just want to do. I love a good laugh, and I've watched some family films, but there's only so much you can watch of it. They get a bit too samey. It's quite hard, so I like to laugh as much to cry. I don't like crying that much, so this.
Yeah. So you never caught
But I do
cry,
cry,
at a
and I
moment
will
in
cry
film?
watching a film. Yeah. Quite
Sorry,
embarrassing to say.
I interrupted you. So you never caught yourself crying during anything?
Oh, yeah, no, frequently.
Oh, really?
So I'm
Can you
saying
name
no,
some, or
that's
do
too
you
often.
want to? Okay, let's move on to the next question.
Yeah, next question, please.
Coming back to what you said about Jaws and that being like a primal thing, I think you're right, and that's because you kind of briefly touched upon it. Horror is very good for doing that, isn't it? I mean, I know you said you don't have a niche for it; you like all sorts of genres, but it is interesting how film explores a certain topic or
Well, this is it. There's often subtext or sub stories about them. It might be social commentary about the way mass consumption or whatever, like zombie films, etc. There's lots of things like that, and I like that as well. Just to not get too complacent. We can also be tremendously cruel and nasty, so I can't help but be interested by those characters. So obviously,
but like you said, I think that's
is quite good.
I think that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's just because it was on the train of thought. I think that's a very natural part of being a human. Do you know what I mean? I mean, for instance, in the animal kingdom, you see it happen to all sorts of animals. In the wild, because that's how they work. So I think that's quite a natural, curious human psyche deep down. I mean, we know we wouldn't act upon it, but we do at some level think about doing it. Do you know what I mean? Maybe not, obviously, not extreme.
Well, that's why if you take the topic of being a predator, I quite like that aspect, in as much as I'd fully acknowledge it almost seems to be a subspecies amongst humanity. Some people are literally predatory.
Exactly.
And actively are seeking the destruction of others.
You see it all the time,
and
don't
we're
you?
sort of naive if we don't think such people exist.
Yeah.
So there's lots of different character traits and personalities and etc. etc.
What kind
So
of film? Sorry.
No,
No, carry on. I didn't want to interrupt you. Sorry.
no, it's not like that. It's more, So it's more an interest. I am a people watcher, and I do like to understand, get underneath the skin of things, and trying to find some unusual stories along the way.
And I think at the moment now, especially with Hollywood, I mean, I've spoken about this with my friend. Hollywood has no more originality, does it? Which kind of ties into what you said, that actually you prefer the more small budget type stuff and the small indie filmmakers, because they're coming up with the more original work, but Hollywood's more of it's basically a money generating, isn't it? So, people respond to it, they're going to keep making those sort of films. And that's the sort of frustrating part of it, because there is really good material out there, but it's getting harder and harder to find, I think. If that makes sense.
Yes. There's a lot of rubbish, but there's always been a lot of rubbish, which is interesting how, you do wonder how such bad films get made and funded.
Yes.
Because there are people getting very large sums to do a really poor story.
It does happen.
No, I think a lot of the time it is, and I don't think that's got any different. But it's more, well, fine. So, stick at it. Maybe you can get some of it.
Did you ever see that film? Because you reminded me of that film, the original one by Mel Brooks, The Producers. It's a bit like that, isn't it? You do kind of wonder, do they do that on purpose? Do you know what I mean? They want to make it a successful flop. And I'm sure that happens in like Western films.
Unquestionably. It is a tax avoidance tool for the wealthy. And lots of things like that. But again, that's just big business. Anything that involves a lot of money attracts a lot of different sorts of people for a lot of different reasons. But that's not my raison d'etre, if you see what I mean. Yeah.
Do you like that film, The Producers?
Yeah, it's a classic. Mel Brooks, he unquestionably, very talented.
It's very funny, isn't it? I mean, I can see how that would have been a bit sort of taboo as well, but he gets away with it because he's Jewish himself, so he can get away with making things like that. Well, at the time, I don't think it would happen much now as much.
Well, that's a certain irony, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think we do make films that are critical of the way things are, but maybe they're a bit more documentary-like, i.e. they tend to stick truer to the story, whereas those who are more a parody or it's humour. And humour is a great vehicle for challenging things, isn't it?
Yeah.
Unquestionably, I wish I was a comedian in that respect.
And you can get all kinds of humour, can't you? There's the slapstick humour. There's a good example of that is the kind of Charlie Chaplin films, and Laurel and Hardy and things like that.
Look, I know I'm old, but he is actually before my time.
No. I'm just meaning in general. I mean, I'm just trying to sort of give a couple of examples to the sorts of humour.
Yes.
Then you have the kind of violent type humour. So, like for instance, Home Alone and those films, at the time when they came out, they were hilarious. But now, when you look back at it, you think actually this is really hard to watch. It's quite stressful.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you get dark humor, which kind of borders on, like we spoke about earlier, horror, doesn't it? You can get a very dark sense of humor, which can be funny, but it's disturbing at the same time.
I probably err towards more.
Yeah.
I probably err more towards that in that respect.
Yeah. Do you have any films that you like to talk about of that kind of genre? Do you have any favourites? And then we can sort of talk about that a bit, maybe. No, too many.
Well, this is it. It's like nothing sort of springing to my mind in that respect, because it's more like, well, my focus is, well, what can I do rather than what have other people done. So yes, I do watch films, but it's a lot of it is to understand their craft or what they're doing. And it's, to get good at your craft is not to be underrated.
So, Nigel, it's going to be quite a short episode. So, is there anything you want to say, and we'll wrap it up? And you're welcome to come back anytime and do like a themed episode.
Yeah, I'm always open to collaboration. If anyone wants to talk to me, got any ideas, want to share a bit of thoughts, I've got all the production gear. I can make it happen.
All right then, and we're going to talk later, aren't we, about collaborating on something? So
yeah, sure.
Great. Okay, well, feel free to come back anytime, and we'll do a themed episode, and then we'll have more to talk about because since you run out of things to say.
Be warned. I wanted to interview you. You remember? I wanted to talk to you about your experiences in this country.
Well, we can do that as well.
But you'll have to do that on camera. You see?
Okay, we'll do that as well then. The shoe will be on your foot. All right then. Thank you, Nigel.
All right. You're welcome, Sonia.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.